right, Winnie and Felicia, we want to kick it off. We want to be mindful of folks' time. So,
Yes, thank you, Dawn. Hello, everyone. My name is Felicia Reynolds. Welcome to our exam roundtable. Yay, welcome. Okay, so here's how we'll be spending our time today. Quick intro, we'll talk about the required tests, exam prep tips, exam prep free resources, strategy, study session, and Q&A. So again, my name is Felicia Reynolds, TNTP Teaching Fellows Manager, Testing Manager. We also have on the call Dawn Gaines, Senior Manager Recruitment, and Winnie Hamra, BEEC Associate for Testing, as well as Dr. Donte Ryan from the Ryan Institute. Okay, so let's get started with going through the BCTR exam requirements. These are the fun things, just kidding. But these are the things that we have to get done. So for BCTR required exams is your content knowledge exam. So that's going to be based on your subject area. So whichever subject you will be, projected to be teaching. And then that's the first exam. And then the second is a praxis core. However, if you have other tests that you've taken, such as SAT, ACT, or GRE, you can use that test score as an exemption if you have, if you meet the certain requirements. And so for those score reports, both exams need to be submitted by the beginning of your pre-service training to be eligible for the hiring pool. If you need to retake your exam, make sure that you reach out to the BCTR team to discuss your possible options. Okay, Teach NOLA. So y'all also have the praxis core, just like BCTR folks. You can also use SAT or ACT as a exemption to take the praxis core. So if you have scores within a certain range in the SAT or ACT or a degree conferred master's, then you don't have to take the core. So you can use that sort of as an exemption. And then your other test requirement would be the content knowledge exam. So again, based off your subject area, you would take the praxis that aligns to that subject area. So again, 2 tests for Teach NOLA. And passing scores should be submitted, sorry, if you saw, August 31st. Thank you. Nevada. Okay, again, praxis core, yay. However, you all can take praxis core or CBEST, so you get an option depending on what you feel, feels right for you. So either of those is a required test. And then again, content knowledge exam is going to be your second required test. And you would take this one during your first year in the classroom. And praxis core or CBEST, that's the required test for Nevada. Okay, so like I said, if you did take SAT or ACT or GRE scores, if you have those scores on you, or if you can access them through the different portals, then you can submit those scores in place of taking the praxis core. So if you see here in this chart, you'll see what the qualifying score is. So if you have a score in that range, then you can use that instead of taking the praxis core. Yes, you can also request them from College Board. Okay, so we're gonna have Dr. Ryan come on and speak with you all about study tips and all that good stuff, how to get y'all through these exams. Dr. Ryan?
Thank you, Ms. Reynolds, and good evening, everyone. Am I coming through clear, Ms. Reynolds? Okay, good, outstanding. So first of all, good evening, everyone. Dr. Ryan from the Ryan Institute. I am actually a native of Baltimore City, so I'm born and raised here in Baltimore. And so if you know anything about Baltimore, one of the most popular things that we do is typically when people ask you what school you go to, we always respond with which high school we go to. And so that's a very big thing in Baltimore. So I went to Poly. I went to Baltimore Polytechnic Institute. And then from there, I went to Morgan. And at Morgan, I received my bachelor's degree in engineering. And I also received my doctorate in engineering from Morgan as well. And so around 2012 or so, I decided to, with my wife, I decided to start a company that was based on academic support. My wife was an educator in Baltimore City and DC, I think total of about 15 years. And then me just being educated in Baltimore City public schools. I've always been in Baltimore City public schools my entire life for K through 12 education. And so I just felt the need to develop a company that would provide that resource for families and students to help them academically. And then as a result, through that, many parents will reach out to us to help them pass different exams. So some parents were looking to do like an apprentice programs. Others were looking to take, like what I'm going to call it, kind of like a entrance exams for various like classes that they were taking. Of course, we do SAT prep. And then, because of my wife being a teacher and she was also a coach for teachers for many years as well, many people will come to us for help with the praxis. And so that's kind of how I became familiar with the praxis through my wife and through some of the teachers that she was coaching as they were looking to pass the praxis. And so the things I want to share with you today is kind of based on my experience with working with various teachers that were looking to pass the praxis. And so this is kind of like some of these strategies that I like to share. Some of them are very general that really can be applied to any test. And then others, we're going to be a little bit more pointed towards the praxis as you all are looking to take. So the first thing I want you guys to do, if you do not have a pencil and paper, please get something to write with. One of the things I realized in this capacity, doing things virtually, is that everyone wants to see the slides, but no one writes anything down, right? So they say, "Hey, send me the slides," but then the slides just sit on their computer and they never really look at it, right? So hopefully, having you guys write down some of these things will help it to stick and help you to remember them, especially one on how do you practice them, and then eventually how do you apply them so that you can perform best on your test. So I'll give everyone a few quick moments to make sure you have something to write with, pencil, paper, pen and paper, or even if you're just taking notes on your computer. All right. So as we do that, really quickly, in the chat, let's drop what are some of your concerns when it comes to taking the praxis? Some of the things that are very common is some people have test anxiety, others are concerned about their time management, others, depending on, especially if you are not coming from a teaching background, some people may feel as though maybe there's some gaps in your understanding of the content. And so just drop in the chat, what are some concerns that you have as you try to prepare for the exam? And I'm going to open up the chat bar. Okay. I see, okay, yep, okay. Yeah, okay, yeah. Yes, yeah, so, okay. Yes, yeah, I see. Why is the test so long? We're talking about taking time to read, running out of time, and studying and remember the content, right? Yep, okay, good. All right, so So it depends on, so I see one question from Raleigh said, is it strictly skills-based questions or teaching-related questions? So that has to do with the test that you're taking. All right, so some of the, I think it's the 7811 test that will ask you some things about pedagogy, you know, and how do you recognize different things when a student gives like a wrong answer, or, you know, based on the wrong answer that a student gives, how can you interpret where the student is struggling? I believe that's on the 7811 test. You know, so it really just depends on which test that you're taking. And maybe that's something that I'm not sure if we'll be able to do it during this session, but maybe if we can kind of get an idea of which test everyone is taking, we can kind of identify, hey, this one is going to be kind of like knowledge of the content. This one is going to be, you know, related, some teaching related questions and things of nature. So maybe we can kind of filter through that and give you guys a table. That way you could look and say, oh, this is my test and this is what I should be expecting to know. But you can also go onto ETS website as well. And that's actually one of the first things I would like to talk about, is really making sure that you go on ETS website and getting the study companion for your particular test. All right. You know, they have it available. It's completely free. But when you download it, one of the things that you want to avoid is downloading it and not really taking a moment to look at it. All right. So one of the things that I think is a big piece of preparing for this exam is mapping out what your plan of attack will be. All right. So what I mean by that is this: we have our start date right now. It is April 27th. And I'm going to use, actually, because someone just emailed me with their test dates. 1 second. Let me see. All right, hold on one. I'm pulling someone's. Okay, yeah, here we go. So Miss Johnson, is Miss Johnson on? Miss Jaquetta Johnson. Okay, I'm just gonna use her as an example because she emailed me. She said, "Hey, I'm taking my test May 21st." All right, and so, you know, how do we map that out? So May 21st, we have less than a month. If we go to our calendar and we pull it up, we see we have, what's that? 1, 2, 3. We have 3 weeks and like 2 days to really kind of prepare for it, right? So that's 23 days in which we're going to be preparing for the test, and we're trying to figure out, hey, how do I do that? You know, how do I, you know, kind of map out what my study plan will be? All right. My next question for you all, when I dive into this, is this: how many of us are on social media? And in the chat, put how much time per week you spend. Actually, no, how much time per day do you spend on social media? All right. And this could be Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. And I'm positive if you got a Snapchat account, you're spending a lot of time on there, because, man, you can go down this Snapchat hole. But how much time do you spend on social media? So again, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter. All right. Just around about. Yes, it is a big trap. 1 to 2 hours. I see Samantha Richards say 1 to 2 hours. Somebody say 30 minutes. All right. All right. And so anyone else has more than 2 hours? It's okay. This is a safe space. You don't have to be ashamed. I see Ms. Reynolds shaking her head saying, yeah, more than 2 hours is very possible. But we got to think about this though, right? Yes, we spend, you know, 2, maybe 3 hours on social media, but if we really think about it, we're not spending it all at one time, right? You know, we're not just sitting there for 3 hours straight or 2 hours straight on social media. What's happening? We're kind of breaking it up into chunks. We got 15 minutes here. We got another 30 minutes here, maybe, or another 10 minutes here, right? So it's these little small chunks. And then before we know it, by the end of the day, we now realize, oh man, I've been on Instagram for an hour and a half or 2 hours. I've been on TikTok for such amount of time. And so this is kind of how I want you guys to really begin to approach preparing for the exam. One of the worst things you can do is try to cram, you know, 2 and 3 hours at a time in preparing for the exam. That's just not going to be very effective. One, many of us, we don't have that type of attention span, right? You know, so we're trying to figure out, hey, you know, trying to sit there for an hour of time. Yeah, I might have the practice material in front of me for an hour, but in actuality, when I really think about it, I've only really focused on the material for maybe 20 or 30 minutes. So that's one thing I want you guys to really understand, is that, hey, when it comes to practice, I'm going to do it in chunks of 20 or better yet, from 15 to 30 minutes as far as a chunk of time in which I can dedicate where I'm not looking at my phone. I'm not, taking care of my kids, right? For those that have children, I'm not worrying about my pets. I'm not, I'm not looking at TV. I'm being very intentional with my 15 to 30 minutes on doing some practice problems, or either I'm reading some material that I'm going to use to apply when it comes to the test. All right. So that's the first thing we can do, and you can do that in multiple sessions in the course of a day. All right. So what I mean by that, if you got an hour lunch break, maybe you say, hey, of that hour lunch break, I'm gonna take 20 minutes and I'm going to focus on, geometry for my math. Right. And maybe you'll go on Khan Academy, or maybe you go on a Momentmetrics, or maybe you're using the ETS practice test to kind of do some of those practice problems. But nonetheless, you're carving it out in 20 minutes. All right. And then you have some other things that you got going on, and then you get home. All right. And maybe before you eat dinner or whatever it may be, maybe you want to try to do another 20 minutes. All right. And then maybe before you go to bed, maybe you can carve out another 20 minutes. So that way you're spending an hour time, working on this, but it's not, an hour straight. If you're like me, very rarely do I get a time in which I could just do something for an hour straight. It's like I have to kind of really carve it out to kind of fit in my schedule because of all the things I have going on. And, I'm pretty sure that all of you are just as busy as I am. So that's the first thing I want you guys to really think about. Hey, what time or what gaps in my time can I utilize for practice, for doing this prep of my praxis exam? Again, this is time that you can say, hey, I can do it very intentional, and I can be very deliberate in what I'm doing as far as practice. So that's what you want to do in your schedule. And some days you may realize, hey, I can dedicate, an hour and a half. Other days, maybe I might be lucky to give 30 minutes, and that's perfectly fine. It's just a matter of being consistent with your practice. All right. So meaning that if out of the course of 7 days, realistically, that you could dedicate about 4 days for practice problems and doing prep, then that's what you want to do consistently until the test day. All right. Any questions on that? All right. So again, we're trying to break it up in chunks. So again, the best thing that you could think about is the use of social media or whatever your guilty pleasure is. I see someone say, Netflix, right? Netflix is definitely something that you can go down the rabbit hole, especially if you're watching a particular series. Before you know it, that one series turns into 3, and so, but again, it's just a matter of, hey, can I carve out just a little bit of time? All right. So in between maybe a Netflix series, you know what? I'm going to carve out 20 minutes of time to do some practice, but you got to be very deliberate and intentional. You could do things such as set an alarm for your phone. All right. I'm really big on doing that. I have easily every day, I have about, 10 or 12 alarms set to kind of help me kind of keep moving with what I'm trying to do with the day. But again, none of this can happen if you're not deliberate and intentional. That's why I say, hey, take a moment and write this down. Write down what days can I commit that I can commit without any compromise to my practice. And then once I can identify the days, what times can I commit? Again, without compromise, meaning that I don't care if you're, one of your buddies called, one of your friends called, your spouse, your partner, whatever it may be. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to compromise on this particular time because I want to make sure I'm getting my practice time in. All right. Now that's a really good question. Madeline, she said, hey, do you have a recommendation for the total number of hours per day? Now that's going to really depend. That's going to change per person. And what do I mean by that? All right. For some of you, you're going to take the core exam and maybe you're just not that strong in math, right? All right. And so with that being said, your practice time is going to look a little different than someone who is a little stronger in math. However, what I always recommend is this. I say look at a 60-40 or a 30-70 split of how you're gonna do your time. And what I mean by that is this. For me, when I would take a standardized exam, I was always very strong in math. So I knew that when I do my practice time, whatever my practice time was going to be, I knew that about 70% of my time I was going to spend on reading and writing, because I knew that 30% I was okay with the math. And so I wanted to spend about 70% of my time on the reading and writing. All right. So you got to kind of identify, okay, well, what is my strength? What is it that I know I can do with minimum amount of practice? And where do I need and what areas do I need the most development? What areas do I need to really focus on with my practice? So again, you have to do that kind of like that personal inventory to identify, hey, this is what I'm strong in this area, not so much, and I'm going to kind of break it up in that time right there. And that's right. The diagnostic tests are a great tool to use to help you identify where you are, or where your strengths and where your areas of development are when it comes to that. So that's a really good tool to use. But then from there, then you have to identify, okay, well, based on the diagnostic test, how many points am I away? See, that's another thing we got to consider. So if if you're, say, for example, if I don't know, let's say 10 points away, well, now you're going to, maybe have to kind of be a little extra when it comes to your practice. Either you're going to be practicing for more days, or you got to try to figure out, hey, how can I get more of those little 20 to 30-minute sessions in the course of a day? All right. And again, that your diagnostic test is going to kind of tell you that story, because some people, they're going to say, hey, I'm about 5 points away. And that's very close. But also it depends on where those 5 points are. And that diagnostic test is going to also kind of help you identify, hey, is there a particular grouping of problems that I'm having difficulty with? So now you can even fine tune your study to really cater to those areas that diagnostic test has identified as your areas for development. So I say all that to say this: there's really no firm answer as to how much time you should spend. All right. What I would say is this: if you have the time, then dedicate the time. And so one of the best ways of doing that is making sure that you just write down. Now, for me, I'm a big Google Calendar person. Like, I need everything on my Google Calendar because I have my phone 24/7. I use that to kind of keep me on track. So I will put in there, I know that I'm going to have, I want to do my math practice for 30 minutes from 8:30 to 9 p.m. All right. I know that tomorrow I want to do my reading practice for about 40 minutes, and I'm going to dedicate that from like 9:20 to 10 a.m. In the morning. And so that's a good one to do there. All right. So your score is based on a couple of things. One is based on your state. It's going to be based on your, and it's also based on the test that you're taking. So I believe Ms. Reynolds kind of, she, in the presentation that she did have a table that was dedicated to that, but we'll make sure that you have all that information. You'll have to identify, hey, this is my target score that we need. All right. Now, related to that target, well, I guess before I move forward, any questions on, first of all, how to at least kind of identify your schedule? Because that's really going to be half the battle. Well, that's really more than half the battle, really, is identifying that schedule, carving out little small chunks of time throughout your day that you can dedicate to practicing. Any questions on the time piece? Any questions on the time piece? All right. I don't hear anything with the time piece. So then let's kind of talk about, the prep itself. So one of the things that is very difficult, and I want you guys to kind of alleviate out your mind, is this: how many questions do I need to get correct? All right. And so the practice exam is very similar to a lot of other standardized tests, where the test that you take is very different. And what I mean by that is this: I'm not sure how many tests they have in rotation for the praxis, but typically what happens is this: you may take a test on a Monday, and it might be one version, and then someone else may take the test, let's say at a different test site, on that Monday as well, and they can also have a completely different test than you. All right. So that's first thing you got to understand, is that each test is completely different. And so because of that, there is no minimum number of input. Like, it's difficult to identify how many questions you need to get correct in order to pass the test. Why is that? Because each test, they have different questions that are weighed differently when it comes to the scoring. All right. So they might have, let's say, for example, test A, for example, may have, let's say, just for simplicity of math, let's say we have 20 math questions. All right. And of those 20 math questions, they're going to categorize, let's say 12 of them as difficult, 5 of them as medium problems, and then you have 3 of them as easy problems, right? And so because of that, because you have more than half of those problems are considered to be a difficult problem, then what they will probably what they would do is kind of scale that test such that you don't need to get as many questions correct as if a test B, for example, that may only have 5 difficult problems, 12 medium problems, and then 3 easy problems. So they kind of scale it that way so that the scoring or the number of problems that you need is based on the difficulty of the questions in totality, more so than it is, for as far as a set number of questions that you need to get correct. So that changes. So you don't want to go in there with they say, oh, I only need to get X amount of questions correct, because that could be that may not be the right number of questions you need to get correct for your particular test. So the way you want to kind of go about it is say, hey, I've taken my diagnostic test. My diagnostic test has helped me identify which areas I'm having the most difficulty in, and I'm now focusing my test prep on those key areas. All right. And some of those key areas may be, I don't know, let's say, I'm just tossing out some topics, but it may be something like number operations, or, order of operations, or maybe things like, geometry focused, or it could be things such as, even if you drill it more, maybe it might be more, you might be having issues with the fractions and decimals or whatever it may be. So you kind of want to use that diagnostic test to really help you pinpoint where you are, as far as where you need to have your focus. All right. The second thing is this, test anxiety. Test anxiety is a really big thing, but I always tell people this: your anxiety or your test anxiety is a direct reflection of your feeling of preparation. All right. What do I mean by that? All right. Do I have anyone in here? Actually, Ms. Reynolds, I'm going to use you as an example since I'm looking right at you. Can you unmute your line for a quick second?
Sure.
Yeah. So, Ms. Reynolds, what is it that you do? What is it that you know for a fact that you could do 100%? No issues whatsoever. You drive?
I do. I can.
All right, good. How long have you been driving?
For over 15 years.
Very good. Okay. Do you remember the first time you got behind the wheel?
Yes.
How nervous were you?
Very nervous.
All right.
Yes.
Do you remember the first time you went in reverse in your vehicle?
Yeah, I was really scared. I had to go really slow.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, 15 years later,
Mhm.
how nervous are you driving?
Not as much.
Right.
I
So
don't
let me
like
ask
to
you this
drive.
question. You ready? So when you first started driving, the chances of you maybe eating and driving probably was completely unlikely. Now, how
Right.
comfortable are you with eating and driving now?
Right. I can do both.
Right. You can do both. How comfortable are you? Do you wear makeup?
I do.
How
Yes,
comfortable
that's
are
a
you
good one.
maybe? Yeah. How comfortable are you with maybe putting makeup on and driving?
And driving?
Yeah.
No.
Maybe putting lipstick on or something like that?
Maybe some lipstick, yeah.
Okay. How comfortable are you with are you a texter and driver? I know you're gonna say no.
No, that's against the law.
Okay.
So I do
Right.
not
Is
do
that with a wink?
Right. No, I try not to, but
Right.
if I have to in an
Right.
emergency,
You will feel a lot more comfortable with it, right?
I can do that. Yes.
Which is drastically different than when you first started, right?
Right.
Now, why is that? Well, let's be honest, right? It's because of those hours of practice, or those hours of actually doing the driving, that has built up your
Mhm.
comfort level, where now you can do more than just simply have 2 hands on the wheel, eyes fixed on the road. All right.
Right.
And so that's how I want us to kind of go into, and thank you, Ms. Reynolds, for being my
No
volunteer.
problem.
but that's how I want us to kind of go into the test prep and how we go into the test. So one of the reasons, in order for us to manage our test anxiety, we have to increase our feeling of being prepared. All right. How do we feel prepared? Well, we have to get just like we got to get a number of hours behind the wheel to increase our comfort level. That's what we're doing with our practice problems. See, many of us, we may know the material, all right? We may know the material, but in a test setting, it makes us a little anxious, all right? And so that's where using the 240 tutoring, that's where using, if you get a practice test from ETS, that's where you're gonna help increase your confidence and decrease your anxiety. All right. But even with that being said, you still may have a level of anxiety still within, when you take the test. It's extremely normal, right? I'm a big sports fan. And, Michael Jordan, he talks about, you know, as great as he was, he always talked about how nervous he was going into a game. Um, but that's just because he wanted to perform at a high level. Oh, yeah, and I actually like the Grizzlies as well. But he talks about, he just wanted to perform at a high level. So that's what really caused the nervousness. But I think we can all agree that Michael Jordan, looking back at it, you know, winning 6 championships, and now when you hear the stories of him just being a gym rat, always in the gym, having a love for the game clause in his contract where he could play at any particular time, anytime he felt like it. Those type of things let you know, hey, he was always in the gym, always practicing, always perfecting his craft. And that's what we need to do when it comes to preparing for this test. See, one thing we cannot do, regardless of how intelligent we are, anything like that, we cannot just simply go up and show up and expect to do amazingly well without prior practice. So we talk about, hey, we laying out the schedule from now to our test date. We're trying to carve out, 4 or 5 days in which we could practice. We're carving out time each day, each of those days in which we can dedicate a block of time, 20 to 30 minutes, right? But we're doing that consistently. And as we're consistently doing that, what we're saying is that, one, I'm able to answer questions that were before, when I started, they were more difficult. Now they become a lot easier. That's the first thing. The second thing we're also are observing is this. Now I'm also able to answer more questions in the same amount of time. What do I mean by that? Well, maybe when you first started off, you found yourself in the 20 minutes that you were practicing, you found yourself only being able to answer 5 to maybe 7 questions. But as you continue to practice, that 5 to 7 questions in that 20 minutes now all of a sudden turns to 10 questions, turns to 15 questions in that same 20-minute span. And so what was happening is that because now you're increasing your knowledge of the understanding, you're increasing your confidence, and as a result, that anxiety is beginning to drop. Now, even with that being said, even during test day, you still may feel a little anxious. You still may feel your palms are going to sweat a little bit. You may even feel like you may even drift a little bit, and that's very normal. So what you always have to do is this, making sure that if there are any athletes on the line, I think athletes can always can relate to this, is because any performers, one of the things that we do before we perform is something very common that all of us do. So if we got a presentation at work, if we have, if you're an athlete, if you an actor, or if you kind of perform at any level, there's something that we all do. Anybody can tell me what we do when it comes to those big moments? Maybe you're speaking at your church, or you're speaking in public. It's something you always do before that big moment, and we do on a regular basis that we don't even realize, because it's pretty impulsive when we do it. Anybody can put in the chat, what is it that we always do in our big moments? It's extremely impulsive. Oh, Vaughn, there we go. Miss Reynolds said, take a deep breath. We do it. If you think about it, every big moment that we have, we always take a deep breath. I remember right before I was doing my dissertation defense, I was in my little office at Morgan, getting ready to go down to the library. And I remember, I said a prayer, but more importantly, as I was walking out, I took a deep breath, regained my composure, and I was able to deliver that biggest moment for me. Now, when you take this test, what may happen is this: you may find yourself drifting, you may find yourself panicking throughout the test. So you got to take those deep breaths as often as you need it. So you might realize that, hey, after every 5 to 7 questions, my anxiety is getting up. Well, guess what? Take 2 or 3 deep breaths, regain your composure, and then do the next 5 to 7 questions. Again, you want to repeat that as often as necessary until you can, until you find yourself being a little bit more composed. All of us have different levels of anxiety when it comes to things like this, like a test, for example. And so there's no right or wrong for either of us. It's just a matter of fact, it's just more so, hey, what is more effective for me? But taking a deep breath, putting your pencil down, or even taking your hands off the keyboard or whatever it may be, and just kind of taking a deep breath, taking 2 deep breaths to regain your composure is one thing that you want to do as frequently as you possibly can. All right. The last thing I want to talk about is is regarding time management when it comes to taking the test. All right. One of the things that I think many students typically do when it comes to taking these tests is they try to do things in order. And I want you guys to remove that out your mind. In fact, I don't want you doing the questions in order. I want you all focusing on what are the easiest questions for me to do. And the great thing about when you take the practice is that you can always bookmark a question, you can skip a question. And I'm gonna encourage that you guys use that resource. I mean, use that tool when it comes to taking the test. Learn to bookmark a question when you and you might ask yourself, well, how do I know when to bookmark a question? Well, it's pretty easy. If you read a question and you don't know where to begin, or if you read a question and you're not quite sure if you can answer it right away, then go ahead and bookmark it and go to the next question. During the test day, we want to spend the most time on the questions that we know how to do and the least amount of time on the questions that's given us the most difficulty. Because at the end of the day, we can always just kind of guess an answer or try to, do an intelligent guess to those questions that are a little bit more difficult. So when it comes to actually taking the test, focus on the questions that you know how to do. And that goes about just simply, when I read a question, can I answer it right away? Or at least can I begin to work on it right away? And if I can answer it within that 30 to 45 second range, then I want to go ahead and do that. If I find myself having to reread the question because I don't really understand what it's asking, or or even if I read it and I understand what it's asking, but I just don't know what it is, I want to bookmark it and skip it. All right. The next thing also, in addition to when it comes to reading those questions, another thing that you want to get in the habit of doing is making sure that you read all of the answer choices, because again, you're trying to pick the best choice. All right. And what do I mean by that is this. These tests are notorious for giving you answer choices that are very close to one another. All right. They're very close to one another. And so what you want to make sure you're doing is that you're not reading an answer choice, and then because that answer choice seems correct, that you're going to automatically jump and answer that question because it seems like it's correct. Because you might read answer choice B and it sounds correct, but then if you would have just read answer choice C, you say, oh, wait a minute, answer choice C is actually a better choice because answer choice B had maybe, I don't know, let's say incorrect word that threw the answer off, or maybe it had an incorrect sign when it came to math or something like that. So you want to make sure that you're reading all of the answer choices before you pick an answer and move to the next question. I see that Kathy Lee, she said, well, math questions take longer. Well, even though math questions may take longer, it's still the same process. And what I mean by that is this: if you could read a question and if you know how to do the problem right away, then go ahead and do it right away. If you're still having a little difficulty with how do I start the problem, or you're not really 100% certain that you could do that problem, just go ahead and bookmark it and skip it. All right. Because one of the things, like I said, one of the things you want to try to avoid is this. You read question 1, you do it right away. You read answer choice 2, you do it right away. You read question 3, and that's spending a little time on it, right? Maybe you're spending 2 or 3 minutes on it, but then you realize, oh, once I got to question 3, I could have did that one right away in 30 seconds. I could have did question 4 in 30 seconds. So the same amount of time that it took you to do question 3, you could have did 4, 5, and 6 in that same amount of time. So that's the reason why we bookmark and skip questions that may take us more than 45 seconds to do, because we want to kind of keep getting those easier questions done first and then go back and do the more difficult questions. Because at worst case scenario, if the question is difficult, well, if I wasn't quite sure I could get it right anyway, then I might as well go ahead and just kind of give myself and just go ahead and guess the answer and spend more time on what I know how to do. So that's why we say, hey, skip around and don't do the questions in order unless you feel comfortable doing them in order. And what I mean by that is that every question that you're doing in order, that's something that you know how to do, and you feel as though you could do it right away. But please don't be set on the idea that you have to do the questions in order. Do them based on your comfort level, based on your understanding of whether or not you could do the question in that time limit of, like I said, I typically use like a 45-second time limit, because if it takes me more than a minute to do, then I'm going to go ahead and skip it and try to go to the next question. And we also do that for a couple of reasons as well. Sometimes you may say, for example, if I I read question 3, I realized, wait a minute, question 3 is a little difficult, I'm gonna skip it. But then when I go down and I do like question 7, and maybe question 7 does something for me, like, oh, I now remember how to do question 3. So it's, you know, when we do the questions that we know how to do, sometimes it will help us remember how to do some of those more difficult questions. So that's why we don't want to be so set on doing questions in order. We want to do the questions that we know how to do, you know, the ones that are easiest first, and then come back and do the more difficult questions. All right. I'm just looking through the chat, see if the okay, so I see Don is already addressing Riley's question. So again, the multiple choice, it just depends on your test. I can't remember which ones. Some of them may have I don't know if you call them BCRs or whatever you call it, where you got to give a more of a response. I forgot what you call those questions, but some of those may have that, and I don't remember right offhand which ones those are. All right. The last thing, so that's actually a good question. So when you take the test, they're actually going to have a timer in the upper window, in your upper right, I think it's upper right hand window of the test window when you take it. Now, I'm glad that you asked that question, Miss Kathy Lee, because the reason why that's important is this. For some of us, looking at that timer count down is actually going to raise our anxiety. So for some of us, we don't want to watch that timer click top countdown. It may not be the most beneficial for us. For some of us, we need that. We need that to kind of keep us on pace. And so again, based on you doing your practice tests, you should be able to identify, hey, seeing a timer that works for me, or seeing a timer it does not work for me. So again, that's why that practice test is really important. All right, so question was, hey, is guesswork allowed? Absolutely. All right, so one of the big things, especially when it comes to the math, one of the big things I always recommend is do not do any mental math. Always write something out. But when it comes to the questions that are more difficult and we're running out of time, or we're trying to make a guess, right? That's where your understanding of the question really helps. What do I mean by that? Is this, so in, you know, let's use math, for example, right? In math, we know that there's certain words that mean certain things. For example, if I see things like difference, or how much more, if I see questions like that, I know that I'm typically thinking about subtraction, right? If I see things like in total, in sum, and something like that, I'm thinking about addition, right? But that's not always the case. That's why you got to have a good understanding of the question. But using those key phrases kind of helps me identify, okay, well, this is what I need to do. So when I do that, or if they ask a question like, for example, which answer choice is greater, or which answer choice is less than, well, that's kind of helping me identify, hey, what answer choice I should be choosing. Because if it's asking me for the sum, well, then chances are I know that my answer choice isn't going to have a minus sign in the answer choice, because I'm doing a sum. Or if it's asking me to, you know, to do a difference, likewise, I shouldn't be saying an addition sign when I'm finding the difference. So it really depends on, you know, when you're guessing your question, or guessing the answer to a particular question, one of the biggest things that you want to do is making sure that you're using what's given in the question to help you intelligently guess the answer choice for that particular question. So that's a really good point. But more importantly, do not leave any answers. I mean, do not leave any questions blank. See, none of the practice tests are going to penalize you for wrong answers. And what I mean by penalize you is that they're not going to subtract points because you have incorrect answers. They're just not going to give you points. They only give you points for correct answers. So you don't want to leave any answer choice blank. But on the same token, you don't want to guess too soon. That's why I say always save the guessing for the end. All right. So you always want to do what you know how to do first, and then come back and then do the more difficult questions. And if you have to guess, then so be it. But you want to save that for the end. Any questions? Any questions? I don't see any questions. All right, so just a really quick recap. 1, identify your schedule. What days and times can you commit to practicing on a consistent basis? All right. For some of us, we're taking the test within 3 weeks. I'm not sure if anyone's taking it in less than 3 weeks. But for the most part, I think most of us have at least 3 weeks of time. All right. So that means we got at least, at least 21 days to map it out. All right. If it's shorter, that just means we got to practice a lot more times within a shorter period of time. All right. So identify your practice days and your practice times. All right. Your practice times, try to carve it up into 20, 30-minute blocks of time in which you're being completely focused. You're not being interrupted by your phone, your children, your spouse, your TV, anything like that. You're being very deliberate and focused at the time at hand. And you need to really write this out. Write it out, put it in your Google Calendar or put it in the calendar, set alarms for that, in your phone so that you're keeping yourself on track. All right. If you have not done so, the diagnostic test, you absolutely need to do a diagnostic test to kind of see where you are, where's your understanding when it comes to the material that's on the test. All right. Now we're practicing. And one thing I should have added when you're doing the practice is try to practice with a timer. All right. And so a good rule of thumb is giving yourself about time. So say, for example, if you know that you want to practice, I don't know, let's say 15 questions. All right. Give yourself anywhere between 12 to 15 minutes to do 15 questions. So that's like 60 seconds per question. All right. And then depending on what your test is. So when you look at your test or when you look at your sample test will tell you, hey, this is the amount of time you have for this section and this is how many questions you have. So whatever your test gives you for the amount of questions, for the amount of time per question, try to utilize that in your practice. So you get in the habit of practicing in a timed environment. All right. When you do a practice test, do it in one sitting. Don't try to do part of the practice test today and then another part of it tomorrow. You want to recreate that test environment. So what it feels like for me to take a full-length practice test, I need to make sure I do that. All right. Now, once I take my practice test, once I've identified my days and times that I want to do my test, now I'm going to do my practice. My practice is going to be based on my feedback from my practice test. Or from my diagnostic test. If my diagnostic test tell me, hey, I had a lower score in my reading, well, now I'm going to break up my time, my practice time, such that about 70% of my time is going to be dedicated to reading. The other 30% of the time is going to be dedicated to the math. Or if you feel as though, hey, if your practice pretty much tell you it's 50-50, then you break it up accordingly. All right. So you're doing your practice, you're setting up your practice based on your exam, based on the feedback from your exam. All right. Now from there, what you're doing is you're kind of building up your confidence, you're building up your understanding of the content such that you should be seeing yourself as you're practicing. You should be seeing a couple of things. One, you're getting more questions correct in the same amount of time. And then also you're getting more questions accomplished in the same amount of time. So that's kind of what you're using as your barometer. So it's going to require you to be a little bit more intentional with your practice. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to get up and practice and that's it. No, track your progress. Wednesday, I did 10 problems, 20 minutes of time. By next Wednesday, maybe you did, 15 practice, 20 minutes, 15 problems and 20 minutes of time. So you want to kind of track your progress to see how you're making out. As you're tracking the amount of questions you've completed, also track the amount of questions you got correct. All right. On the ETS website, make sure you download and have in your possession the test companion or the study companion for your particular test. All right. And so that kind of answers your question, Ferdinand, regarding more about the reading and writing portion of the exam. So depending on what exam you're taking, all right, if you download the study companion, it's going to tell you, hey, these are the areas that it's going to target. All right, and it will kind of identify, and it also gives you even some practice questions as well for what kind of questions you should expect. So everyone should download their study companion for their particular test. Like you should have that in your possession immediately. And you can go on the ETS website to do that. All right. Test day. What you're doing on test day. One, obviously, I think they're still doing I'm not sure if they're still doing the option where you could test at home. I would encourage you to go to a test center. All right, get out of the environment that can be distracting to you. I will go to a test center to take the test. When you go to a test center, they have the calculator on the computer, so you don't really need to bring a computer. In fact, I think in test centers they won't even let you bring anything in. Now I think about it, so but check with your test center, because I'm not really sure about that. I'm not sure if they allow you to bring calculators in or not. I think you have to use the calculator that's on the computer. And I think I'm not sure about pencils. I'm not sure if they allow you to bring your own pencils and stuff like that. So please check with the test centers. Yes, if you are going to take the at-home test, make sure you review the requirements, because there's things like, got to have a mirror setup. It's like a whole little setup that you got to have. That's why I say to me, it seems like setting up for an at-home test can be a little bit more stressful than just parking my car or catching the bus to my test center and then showing up at my test center. So I'm not sure and it's up to you. I mean, everyone's different. So, you have to ask yourself, if taking the test at home, does that give you an added advantage over just going to a test center where everything is already set up for you? All right. And you just got to show up. But nonetheless, for your test day, make sure you show up a few minutes early. That also helps with you keeping your composure, because how many of us, when we show up and we're late, think how long it takes for us to regain our composure. So, showing up, 15 minutes early, that helps you keep your composure. Again, check with your test center to make sure what you can bring and what you cannot bring. All right. Always use the scrap paper. Even if you're just using the scrap paper to kind of think through something, it's always good to use it versus trying to keep something in your mind and trying to do it mentally. Test day, again, we're doing problems based on if they're easy or not. So we do all the easy problems first. We bookmark the difficult problems as we encounter them, and then we go back and do them at the end. All right. But more importantly, after we do the easy problems, we do the difficult problems, but more importantly, we do not leave any question blank. We want to make sure that we have answered all questions. But if you have to do any guessing, you want to save the guessing for the end. Do not do the guessing at the beginning. Do not do the guessing at the beginning. With that being said, are there any questions, any concerns on anything that I covered? Or was there anything that I did not cover? Yeah, so that's someone asked why is the Maryland test scores requirements higher than other states? Now that I do not know. I do not set those requirements, but yeah. So I'm not sure about that. Now someone asked, I have 2 tests to take, the mathematics, content, knowledge, and so I'm confused what you mean by the ACT or the SAT. What do you mean by that? If you can message me and ask me, kind of clarify, because I'm not sure. When you say you have 2 tests to take, I don't think the SAT or the ACT should be one of them.
Dr. Ryan, I'm not seeing that question.
It was a direct message to me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was a direct message. So I'm just trying to get some clarity on that. But Don, did I miss any other questions? I think most of the questions you addressed.
I don't think we missed anything. Right, we talked about running out of time, taking the time to read the question fully.
That's right. And reading the
yeah.
answer choices in its
Mhm.
entirety. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. So reading the question making sure we understand the question, and then reading those answer choices. That's a common mistake many people make. They'll just kind of pick the first first answer choice that seems correct. But just take that extra 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and then read all of the answer choices and then pick the best one based off of that. All right, last thing I want to say is this. For those of us that are, perhaps you feel a little unconfident in your math ability. All right. If you feel a little, if you feel a little discouraged when it comes to your math, I strongly recommend utilizing Khan Academy. You could do a couple of things with Khan Academy. You could, like, for example, you could, like, if you know that, hey, you know what, fractions, fractions are just not my strength. When you go on Khan Academy, you can directly go in there and you can search, adding and subtracting fractions, and it will come up with a list of exercises that you can do. If you are doing, I don't know, let's say geometry or, parallelograms and things of that nature, like, you could type that into Khan Academy and you could look at a video. You can also do some practice exercises just to make sure that you are familiar and you are comfortable with the content of that, right? And so I'll always highly recommend Khan Academy. It's it's really easy to help you get an understanding of, or kind of boost up your understanding in the content. So you're using 240 tutoring, and you might find, say, wait a minute, this particular area in my math content I just keep struggling with. Well, go ahead and go to Khan Academy, type in that content in Khan Academy, and do practice problems based on that. That way you can kind of get a better understanding of that content. So for those of you that say, hey, my SAT score I don't remember, but you can always go to College Board, collegeboard.org. You can always go there, create an account with College Board, and you should be able to pull up your score actually from there. They might already have your scores already there. Now I don't know if if you can report it simply by printing them. I'm not sure about that, or if you have to have them officially sent. So that I don't know for certain. So we'll have to do some digging for that. But collegeboard.org is the site that you want to use to get your SAT scores. Okay. All right. Yep. So, okay. All right. Okay. I'm sorry. Let me do this. So Khan Academy.org. Are there any other questions? Are there any other questions? I don't see any questions. Is there anything that I could have done differently to help you all? Is there anything I could have done differently? You can shoot me a private message if you want. I'm always interested in, what I can do better. So if there's anything that you felt, oh, Sam, I see you raise your hand. You're muted. I'm not sure if you wanted to ask a question or not.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. I had my 2 masters and I'm getting my PhD in the next 2 years. So my transcript were evaluated by Maryland Department of Education. So the question is, I was exempted from practice 1 because I had a higher GPA in school. So do I need to take the practice 1 again?
Okay, so you're saying, hey, based on your GPA, do you need to take the Praxis 1?
Yes, because
Okay.
Maryland Department of Education exempted me from taking practice 1 because I had a higher GPA of 3.4. So
Okay.
Dr. Ryan, I can take this. Samuel, if you're going through BCTR, since we are an alternative route, the 3.0 waiver is not applicable to us yet. It's only for your traditional programs is where that waiver comes in.
Any other questions? Any other questions?
You can also raise your hand by pressing the reaction button if you want us to take you off mute. So yeah, if you have any questions for Dr. Ryan specifically, let's go ahead and ask those. Or feel free to put it in the chat.
Also being mindful of time. I know we're already 2 minutes over, and Dr. Ryan, thank you so much. But Winnie, if we can still put questions in the chat as Winnie is going through some of the free resources that we offer, and also contact us. I know a lot of people had questions that we may not have gotten to, so we'll have contact information that we can definitely set up some time to speak with you. Dr. Ryan, is that okay with you? Oh.
Winnie, did you want to start sharing talking about resources? I don't think I saw any more questions this moment.
Yeah, I'm just having some technical difficulties with the presentation. So
Okay.
you can just bear with me for one moment.
Sure.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. So my question is about like the proxy 1 and proxy 2, because once I schedule like my proxy 1 exam, I uploaded it on the website and I have like, hey, you have to schedule the proxy 2. So I know the proxy 1 is about, like, for me, the mathematics content knowledge and ACT or SAT. So I want to like know more about that.
Thank you for your question. Are you specifically speaking about the requirements?
So like for me, I have to take both, right? The proxy
Yes.
1 and proxy 2, right?
Yes.
And proxy 1 is only about mathematics, content knowledge, right?
The praxis 2 is the content knowledge exam, which is the mathematics 5161.
Yeah. And how about the other one, like the like ACT is the one that include math and reading and writing?
That I'm assuming so. So to meet the requirements, you have to, for Baltimore, you have to have the Praxis 2 content knowledge and either the Praxis 4, or you can take the SAT, ACT, or you can have an exemption based on a previous score. So if we can, Winnie, if you wouldn't mind setting up time, we can kind of talk through that and understand the specifics of your question, if that works for you.
Yep, we can go ahead and do that. If there are no other questions right now, I will just walk everyone through the resources again. I did see quite a few questions in the chat about the specific resources. So if you are needing the resources from 240 Tutoring, you should have received an invitation. to get started with all of those resources on 240 Tutoring. And it's a free 30-day access to the online platform. You can walk through the study guide, and it also, if you complete 90% of the work in 240 Tutoring, it will allow you to unlock 3 additional practice tests. And as Dr. Ryan was mentioning, to be able to gauge your progress and to see how well you're doing, or to see if there are areas where you do want to focus more time. The practice tests and practice questions are super, super helpful. So any of these resources where you can access practice test questions are going to be really helpful to you. So for 240 Tutoring, if you scroll to the exam that you're taking, you can walk through the study materials there, and it'll unlock tests for you. There's also study guides themselves and flashcards and practice exams, as I just said. And then for Mometrics, so the majority of the exams that you all will be taking, you will be using the resources on 240 Tutoring. However, there are some specifics, which are the 7811 and the biology content knowledge, which is the 5235. And then you're going to use the resources of Mometrics to prepare for those exams. And again, Mometrics provides interactive flashcards, and it also provides you with 4 practice tests with different content in each of those practice tests, along with study guides, flashcards, and practice exams. So for 240 Tutoring, for those resources, there are diagnostic tests available, and you'll see when you scroll to your exam on the top right-hand corner, you'll see diagnostic tests. For Mometrics, it's not indicated that it's a diagnostic test, but the interactive practice test questions, there are 4 sets of them, and those are what you'll want to use as your diagnostic on Mometrics. And you should have received all of that information. If you haven't, just reach out to us and we'll get you set up with those resources. There we go. And as Dr. Ryan also mentioned, the ETS website is super, super helpful. And I will just underline what Dr. Ryan said, that the study companions are really, really helpful in terms of providing practice test questions, also breaking down the exam. So which type of questions in which part of the exam. And it also gives you a bit more of an explanation about the types of questions. So the study companions are super helpful. There are also practice tests on the ETS website. When you register for the exam, you'll receive a confirmation email from ets.org. And if you scroll all the way to the bottom of that email, you'll see a serial number. And that serial number will allow you to access, I think it's 10 free attempts at a practice test on ets.org as well. So again, I'm just explaining this to you so that you have lots of different places where you can go to take, to go over test questions. So in addition to the study companions, like I said just now, there's practice tests and sample questions and study planning support. So helps you create a schedule and things like that. And as Dr. Ryan mentioned, the Khan Academy is really, really helpful as well. And diagnostic exams are also available on Khan Academy for the core. I believe you can take a diagnostic for each portion of the core. So the reading, the writing, and the math. And here we are at the questions again. If you have any other questions, you can put it in the chat as I'm speaking about this, which is scheduling a one-to-one strategy session. So this is test prep strategy sessions. And we really recommend that you schedule a call with us, either myself or with Felicia. We can help you go over your diagnostic results and help guide you where you'll want to focus your study time. And we can help you map out a personalized study plan. And here are just some contact information if you need to reach us. And again, if you have any other questions, you can either raise your hand or drop them in the chat.
All right, I think we can close out. Again, love seeing so many questions, and testing is definitely tricky area. So just a quick reminder that we are here to support you. So reach out to Winnie, Felicia, myself at any time. You can reach us in the info account, info@tntpteachingfellows.org, and then also schedule some time on Winnie and Felicia's calendar. Take advantage of our resources, definitely. All right, so we can go ahead and sign off, but appreciate everyone's time. We know that your time is valuable, but definitely appreciate you being here with us tonight. All right, thanks all.